Now, as we start to get some of those results in, we are joined by Jim Henson from the UT Texas Politics Project, because he's going to talk to us about the polls versus the results. And this is a really exciting topic, Ryan.
Let's start with that, Jim. How are things going from what you expected to what we're seeing?
Well, so far what we've been seeing, and again, these results are preliminary. We're still early in a lot of these races, although results are coming in pretty fast from some of the big counties. Not a lot of big surprises, and I think where we expected there to be uncertainty in the polling based on the public polling, both that we've done and that we've seen from other folks, we're seeing that. So in the Attorney General's race, there's been a lot of movement in that race on the Republican side. Eva Guzman and George Bush, at the last numbers I saw, were very close, have been moving back and forth. Two candidates that spent a lot of money against incumbent Ken Paxton. I think the big news out of that race is that the expectation that's been building in the last week that Attorney General Paxton is bound for a runoff seems to be coming true, and that Attorney General race on the Republican side was kind of two races. It was Paxton versus Gohmert and Guzman versus Bush. The Guzman versus Bush race is still very much going on. In a sense, Louis Gohmert has had the impact we expected, in that, based on the assumption that Louis Gohmert's votes are the votes that he takes are votes that were most likely Paxton. Gohmert's entrance in that race has been a real fly in the ointment and a spoiler for Ken Paxton.
Yeah, fascinating. And we want to point out some points about that poll. Jim, we really jumped into it. You guys last month, into January, first weeks of February, talked to 1,200 registered voters, asked them which one of the primaries they plan to vote on, and then looked at the numbers and the data from there. Right. So let's talk about the Republican governor's race. So the results as they stand right now, we said just moments ago, Don Huffines actually conceded and put out a statement. Governor Greg Abbott sitting at about 69% of the vote. Don Huffines was in second place at 12%, followed by the former chair of the Texas Republican Party, Alan West, and then Rick Perry, not that Rick Perry, but another Rick Perry at 3%. There are even more candidates in this race if we want to flip to the next slide there. But there are some other candidates all polling at 3% or less. And when we looked at what you all found on the poll, you found that 60% of those voters said that they were going to vote for Abbott. So 60%, we're at 69 right now. We want to point out still early in the night. Sure. But this is pretty close.
Yeah, we were in the field, in the first couple of weeks of February, and these are always estimates at a point in time. I won't fib and say we're not, it sure always feels good to be, in the ballpark and to be plausibly close. There was still a lot of movement to be had, I think, at that point between West and Huffines, and we're seeing that. And I suspect we're going to see that a little bit more in the rest of the night. So, I think that, what we're seeing tonight, what we've seen in most of the polling, both ours and, again, the polling we've seen others do, was that Governor Abbott, this was his race to lose. And I think that there were, there was some evidence that there were Republicans, giving other people a look. But the governor's been running this race for a year and a half. He knew he was going to be challenged from the right side of the spectrum, and he just didn't leave much room for other candidates to get much traction to his right.
We've already heard from Beto O'Rourke tonight, Jim. He's been campaigning against Governor Abbott the entire time. Nothing's really changed there. But now going forward, how does his stance kind of change as now we kind of know where we're going to be for the next few months?
Well, man, you're right. In a lot of ways, this general election campaign, certainly for Beto O'Rourke, started the day he declared back in November. Not a lot of surprises here. I think we had former Congressman O'Rourke at 93%. And once you got somebody polling in the 90s, what the exact number, it doesn't really matter very much. So going forward, I think, the big question for Beto O'Rourke is, does he have to adjust his message as this campaign enters the formal general election phase? I was interested to hear in the beginning of his speech the first line of his attack on Governor Abbott was the first line of his attack on Governor Abbott when he declared his candidacy, which was his criticism of the failure of the power grid. And I think the problem with that is that there's it's understandable that the Democratic campaign is focusing on that. Our own polling has shown a lot of anxiety about the grid still a year later that I think a lot of us have experienced, and a lot of doubt that what's been done. On the other hand, moving the needle in terms of what people say are the most important problems that they're worried about.
You know, I do want to ask you about the Democratic race for lieutenant governor. No big surprises in terms of the Republican side of the ticket with Dan Patrick leading, but this particular race with the candidate in Mike Collier, who's ran for statewide office twice now, who has had, some name recognition, came really close to Dan Patrick in 2018, to now be looking towards a runoff. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think Mike Collier was in a tough spot here. On one hand, you're right. I mean, there was no doubt going into this race or going into this campaign that he was going to run again because he did come pretty close to Dan Patrick in the last go-round in 2018. Well, what I think this underlines is that Democrats really had the wind at their backs in 2018. And that's not what the environment looks like in 2022. And in terms of Mike Collier's position, it's understandable that Mike Collier would say, look, I should get another shot. I came close last time. But the truth of the matter is he may not have come close last time solely on his own power. It may also have been that the context was very favorable with three candidates in this race. It's not going to be a surprising outcome if these numbers hold and we wind up in a runoff. But again, this is another race where it's still a bit early, and I would expect this to move around a little bit.
Yeah, Jim, we're having a little bit of a problem with your connection here, so I think we're going to stop here. We thank you so much, though, for taking some time to chat with us tonight. Should point out that you guys called it that this was going to be a runoff. It looks like what you called to happen. I say you called it. You did polling. You're just reporting on the numbers, but you're a very smart person. You've got the analysis down, and what you said was going to happen is happening. How does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel like you're right. I'm sorry that the connection's not good, but we should probably quit while I'm ahead.
Fair enough. All right, that is Dr. Jim Henson from the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas at Austin talking with us tonight. We thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us. We appreciate you.